Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. That was a really nice intro. I don't know if I justified it completely, but I'm glad I'm the first one. I'll keep it light here with filmmaking. What I see with AI and why is AI important with filmmaking? I'll go back a little bit on why is it important for me. I was born in a really small country in Bosnia, and as a kid, thinking about working in the film industry is not something you can do and think you can do for a living, right? It's something you can dream of, or you can tell your parents you want to do, and they tell you you're crazy. So for me, really what we saw with AI is accessibility. And with accessibility really comes the power of letting everybody tell the stories they want. But before we go into AI, I want to go a little bit and bore you with a little bit with a history of film. And we'll start with how it all started. And it's really fitting that we're here in Vegas because really film industry wouldn't exist, or camera wouldn't exist if it wasn't for a bet. Probably some of you know this story, but Leland Stanford challenged some of his friends because they were watching horse racing, and he challenged them saying that when a horse is running, that all four hooves are up in the air. And obviously technology back then, there were only picture camera, so there was no way to capture a video. So he hired Edward Muybridge, who was a famous photographer, and Edward essentially invented what we call a moving camera today. He set up 12 cameras with cables, and then as the horse was running, was triggering every single camera, and they actually proved that, that all four legs were in the air. Going forward, and why that's important, going forward in 1888, Thomas Edison and one of his assistants, William Dixon, actually invented the first moving picture camera called kinetograph. But the problem there with accessibility is that only one person could watch what was filmed at the time. And so going back to that accessibility, in France, Lumiere brothers wanted to fix that. And they essentially invented cinematograph, which projected a film so more people can see it. This is one of the first films ever being made. They were filming their workers leaving the factory. The interesting thing, I come from a background in visual effects, and one of the most famous first visual effects, if you can say directors, was Georges Méliès. And Georges Méliès was a magician. And when he saw what Lumiere brothers did, he really wanted to create films and record his magic so he can show it to the masses. But again, going back to the accessibility, Lumiere brothers wouldn't sell him the camera. He offered them a lot of money. Lumiere brothers really wanted to keep it to himself and go around France and show it to rich families in their houses. So Lumiere went, Méliès went and he created his own camera and really recorded what was, by accident, the first visual effects ever made. He was filming people in the streets of Paris, and his camera jammed. And as his camera unjammed, the traffic and the people moved, and they just reappeared, and it looked like they changed from a man to a woman or from a horse into a carriage. And that's when he basically got an idea of how to create first special effects and visual effects. You can see some of his early films, and his famous film, Trip to the Moon, which was one of the first films that used a lot of special effects and visual effects, and really was a start of all the sci-fi as we know it. This was back in 1896. Now, going after that, what a lot of people don't know, when you think about Hollywood, you really think about studios, and you think about studios always being as this opposite of independent films. But actually, Hollywood wasn't the first studio. The first studio was in New Jersey. So Edison, as he invented the camera, he had patent on the camera and the projector. And what Edison did, he started this motion picture patent company. And essentially everybody that made films had to go through Edison Company and had to license out films and get a permission to shoot. And obviously a lot of filmmakers and early storytellers didn't like that. So they found this small town called Hollywood in California where they moved. The story was originally people think they moved there because of the weather, but actually they moved there to escape patent laws because the California judges were a little bit more forgiving than New York judges. And also back in the day, it took a long time to come across the country to pursue someone. So really, the start of Hollywood was by independent filmmakers, which today we know as studios, which I thought was really interesting. And why I'm talking about this, if we're talking about AI, is that subconsciously, I feel like us as storytellers always strive towards that accessibility and always strive towards that access and free, what I like to call no permission storytelling. And we'll go a little bit on what happens, 100 years from then, right? So it was really obviously hard and expensive to make films back then, but accessibility hasn't changed that dramatically. If we look about how movies are made today, they're really, really extremely expensive. For a reference, I looked up this building, and it cost about $130 million to make this entire building. One movie will cost you $250 million plus. So it's kind of a silly thought. But one of the reasons it's so expensive because the process and technology is still, in my mind, not where it should be. So I'll show you a little bit, before we go into how AI and how we're using AI, I'll show you a little bit on how movies are made today with a little bit of more visual effects and sci-fi heavy films. So this is from a movie that my co-founder, Ty Sheridan, did called Ready Player One, if some of you have seen it. And right now, if you want to make films with CG characters, you need these motion capture suits. You've probably seen it on Avatar, these silly pajamas that you wear, and you have sensors all around. They're super uncomfortable, and they're really, really heavy and obviously expensive with all this volume. So this is called volume, and that's when you're doing a full CG film. Or if you're doing something we call live action. Live action film is if you're shooting a real world, and then you're composing a CG character in it. You still need all these sensors. You still need to set up all of this equipment, and that's only to pick up animation and movements of characters and actors, obviously. And then, obviously, animation is just one step. You need to pick up what we call, you put these reflective balls to get light reflections, to see where the light sources are coming from. And then you need to shoot something we call clean plate. Clean plate is essentially you shoot a shot with an actor, and you have this robotic arm, you tell the actor to move, and then you shoot that shot again. So obviously, going back to indie filmmakers, already at production level, 99% of filmmakers cannot afford this because it's extremely expensive. It's very slow. It requires large crews, and it really, really limits creativity. And then in post-production is really where your true cost comes. And in post-production, there's a lot of what we call manual steps, kind of non-creative steps of it. I was a visual effects artist, and early in your career, you're hoping you're going to do a lot of creative stuff, but you get stuck with things like this, where you're doing keyframe by keyframe. Then you do something called lighting and compositing, which you're also doing shot by shot, keyframe by keyframe, or something like rotoscoping. So as I mentioned, very, very non-creative, a lot of manual step. Sometimes an average artist will take one day to do about 14 frames per day. Obviously, 1 second has 24, and that's each of these categories. And then it's a really complex pipeline. If you're making a movie, you're going to use about 5 or 6 softwares. Some of them are 3D software, some of them are compositing softwares, and they take a lot of years to learn. To become a novice, you need about 5 to 7 years. To be an expert, you need about 15 years. So as you can see, it's already really high barrier of entry, and that's one of the reasons that you're going to have films that will cost you $20,000 to $25,000 per second and take up to 2 years in post-production. This is why the films will cost up to $300 million. And obviously, for me personally, me and Ty, when we started our company, we started because we started writing together. And every time we wrote something, we would write a sci-fi or a fantasy that obviously we could never get funded for or afford. So we really stumbled upon AI about 2018. And we saw a drastic shift in the industry. Just like the first cameras were drastically changing films, we believe that's what AI is doing right now with filmmaking, which is giving opportunities to every storyteller all around the world to make films they desire. So what we did, we made a recently launched Wonder Studio. And what we did on all these steps we just showed you, we essentially automated. We used deep learning to automatically animate, light, and compose a CG character in live action or animation. And we said if we're going to really enable this for everybody, it needs to be no hardware whatsoever. It all needs to be out of footage. And how we stumbled upon it is really through technology of self-driving cars and robotics, which is all about understanding the world around yourself. You have a traditional computer vision, but for us, we call it more scene understanding. A good example is if you're teaching a robot or training a robot how to make your sandwich, first you need to train that robot how to recognize a sandwich, then it needs to recognize movements, then it needs to recognize depth, distance, etc. So very similar, we just started doing that from a film standpoint. So we train it on film data, we train it on understanding what film shots, etc. And what was really important for us is that that is not a one-step process, because it's really important to keep artists in the loop. But also, what our process did, we use about 25 ML models. And what it does, it analyzes your footage. It analyzes body motion, face motion. It analyzes where the light sources are coming from. It even analyzes what kind of shot it is. Is it a close-up? Is it a wide shot, et cetera? And then it deletes that actor, and it composes a CG character instead of the actor, and lights and composes it. And the most important thing for us, we knew that visual effects and filmmaking is extremely, extremely difficult. And there's no AI that can just solve it all with one click. So for us, it was really important. I always say, disrupt, but don't destroy. So for us, it was really important that we build it in a way that it can be accessible in existing pipelines. So everything we pull out in the 3D space. And I'll show you what that means. This is Thai. And essentially, we built it as a web browser. We're in the cloud as a web browser. That was really important for us because not everybody can afford expensive GPUs. But the process is super simple. It's just a drag and drop. As you can see, this sequence has multiple actors. And basically, AI will detect the actors, assign which character you want. It will delete that actor and compose a CG character instead. And obviously, this will cut down the cost drastically, up to 80 to 90% in some instances. And really, our mission has always been, how do we enable indie filmmakers to do what traditionally has always been reserved for studio budgets? And obviously, you can do your Pixar-like stylized characters as well, if you wish. And as I mentioned, what's really important is that you get all this information in 3D space. So you get your camera, you get your lighting information, and you get your animation data, so you can go and edit and clean up. This is something that was, when we started, we recently did a project with the Russo brothers, Joe Russo, who directed Avengers. He's on our board. And we brought in artists that worked on big films like Avatar, et cetera, and we asked them, don't worry about AI. You just tell us what you need from data to achieve your final VFX shot. And that was something that was really crucial, because I think there's a lot of AI solutions out there that are just trying to go completely outside of existing workflow. And I think it is important to be cautious of artists and what they need to keep working with. At the end of the day, the artists, the ones will be telling these stories. Just to show you a little bit more, this is from last year from AI4. We did a couple of videos for fun.
New friends.
Oh, here we go.
And chatting about the future of AI. I am so grateful to be with you for the next 20 minutes as I share pathways to a diverse workforce in data careers.
And so, of course, because we're in an AI conference, we had to replace her with a robot.
Meeting new friends. What an exciting time this future of AI. Connecting with colleagues. I am so grateful meeting new friends for the next and chatting about the future of AI. Pathways to a diverse.
And also, we have another video.
AI or citizen-did AI or anything like that, but there needs to be a disciplined approach to AI. Your talent needs to be good, needs to know how to deal with imbalanced data set, right? You can't use accuracy if your data set is imbalanced, right? Federated AI or citizen-did AI.
This is only because we discovered aliens recently, or the government finally told us they're aliens, which we knew.
Needs to know how to deal with imbalanced data set. Right? You can't use accuracy if you're.
But one thing we noticed really, which was exciting for us, is that when we launched, is that we asked people to, when they sign up, to tell us what industry they come from. And what really surprised us is that we got a lot of people from education, from music industry, from advertising, and we got a lot of individuals and small studios from around the world, teams of 5 to 8 people. And that was, for us, considered a success, because I think my personal frustration always has been, as a young kid growing up in a small country, you don't think there's a chance you can even ever work in Hollywood. That's something you don't think it's possible. This traditional a sense of how you break in this industry is you have to move to LA. You got to start in a mailroom, maybe at an agency, or working as a PA on a set somewhere. But to align for you to move in a certain location, to be able to tell stories, is really, really difficult. I was lucky enough, I was one of those people that moved with a dream in a suitcase, one-way ticket and no money whatsoever, and worked my way up. I lived in people's basement and spare rooms. But what really, we saw technology as a means to an end. And for us, that's all about how do we make sure that storytelling is not tied to socioeconomic status. That's something that's really, really important for me and for us at Wonder Dynamics, because I think good stories can come from anywhere. And I think for us, what's exciting, not just our company, but what AI is doing is, this question is, where is the next Steven Spielberg coming from? Is there some village across the world? And that's what I think is the purpose of this technology innovation. And I really am excited to see in the next 2 to 3 years what happens. I think we're going to see greater stories, and I think we're going to inspire more young people to dare to pursue a dream of storytelling. Thank you.